Hi, parents. Welcome to another episode of Parent Like a Professional. We have Dr. Eric Meyer here today. We have our other BCBA, Stephanie Amari, Monica Yanokita, and I'm Marky Helms. And so today is a topic that is probably near and dear to a lot of parents, us included. And we've all been there. You're tired, you're frustrated, and it's the heat of the moment. And that little voice inside your head wants to say something not so great. Maybe it's out of exhaustion or maybe it's out of worry for your child. But what we say out loud can make all the difference in shaping their behavior and self esteem. So I'm going to put the question out there, guys. What is an inside thought or your inside voice versus an outside voice?
For starters, I think we were talking before we started filming, and we were talking a little bit about some of the concerns when we yell at our children. And, what are some of the side effects of yelling at our children when we're frustrated because they're not listening or they're not following instructions or you're late and you have to get them to school. And just as a reminder, how we conduct ourselves with our children sets the tone for the rest of the day. And so that was kind of a concern between the four of us here. Why is it so important to really think about how we're going to present what we want to present to our children, let's say early in the morning or late at night, and how it would affect them over the course of the rest of the day or, right before they go to sleep. So inside thoughts or your inside voice. Monica Kubos, Monica Yanokita, 3 children, young, all in elementary school. What are your thoughts sometimes when it's late, it's raining, you're trying to get the kids ready, it's time to go to school?
I've actually been totally really struggling with this lately in our own life here at home and I will say 10 out of 10 times yelling or getting frustrated, it totally backfires. So it's hard because I know it's not going to work, but it's that it does for 1 second make me feel better. And then it still backfires. The kids don't listen as well, or now they feel hurt and then I feel terrible. So I've been really trying to work on that, just taking a second before, because a lot of things, one of my children, they're very slow in the morning. She's very slow in the morning. And I'm just like, why are you so slow? My inside voice and thought. Yes.
Marley.
That's it. So, versus, taking the time. She's so much better when she has a list. When I give her, I know that, right? So giving her a list of what she needs to do in the morning, or walking in there instead of exploding, being like, how are you not dressed yet? You've been up for 20 minutes. Versus just being like, hey, can I help you find something to wear today? Can I help you pick it out? The outside voice. So anyway, I've been really trying to work on keeping that inside voice in a lot more lately. But that's one example, the slow. Why are you so slow? I can't believe, I kind of just I can't believe you haven't done this yet. Just also really not helpful for them. So I even had my son told me recently, he said, Mom, you tell me so many things to do and it feels like I'm doing it wrong. He's like, it's so much better when you write the list out for me. I was like, oh, okay. He's coming up with his own solutions.
That's good.
But anyway, this was a topic that I thought was really important that I'm working through right now too. Which I'm sure many people are. I'm sure it gets so much better when they get older too.
I don't know, Steph, how's your teenager?
I had so similar issues, but he's a bit older and it's a lot. He's 13, so it's a lot of, I think, him being 13 and trying to really push my buttons. So it's very difficult. He'll try to one up me. So it's not about being quiet when I'm upset. He will then try to just say something just in a snarky way or in a way and then I'm very quick to okay, now I'm going to one up you. And it just tends to be this very terrible dynamic. And so what I've learned and I need to practice is I just have to keep my mouth shut and walk away. So we just came off of, winter break. And so I was home with him for 2 weeks, and he would only come out of his room to bother me and to bug me and ruffle my feathers and go back into his room. And that was, so a lot of me, it's just keeping my cool and realizing what's happening in this dynamic, because that's just like that's him and him trying to, I don't know what he's trying to do, get my attention, see how much he can like push my buttons. And so I very much have just practicing just not saying anything and taking a deep breath and typically just like walking away until because once I'm out of this, he doesn't follow me to like continue doing it. It's like, once it's done, it's done. So that's something I need to practice, is not so much saying things differently, because it doesn't matter what I say, it will just come off and he'll try to overpower whatever it is I'm saying. So it's just me walking away and coming back to it, or not coming back to it later, depending on how important it is.
Teenagers have, and children, they all have their personalities, right? Different personalities. I have 3 teenagers, 14, 16, and 18. And, for the most part, like, it definitely gets easier. There's no question. But then there are times where, you'll have like one out of the 3 who's very organized, the other one is semi-organized, and then, the third might not be as organized. And so I think, Monica, like what you were talking about earlier, and your son was requesting this, is coming up with a list of things that they need to do. Maybe even talking to them, the night before about what they need to do to prepare for the next day. I think those are very helpful. I think what happens a lot of times, and we were talking about this earlier, is that, as a parent or parents, sometimes we're struggling ourselves to get ready in the morning, and we're late, and we're trying to get the kids, in the car, or, get them out the door so that they can get to school. And you're already having a lot of other things that are thrown at you, which is called life. And so you're flustered, or you're frustrated, or you start to get angry. What are some coping skills you guys are using so that you're not yelling at your children in the morning, trying to get them to school, or, from point A to point B? What's worked for you guys?
For me personally, it's taking that breath, or that one moment, and trying to think about, how can I respond in the way that I know is going to be helpful for them in the long run? So just pausing. And lately I've been really fortunate to have my husband here with me. And so sometimes it's really just tapping out. So I will walk away, kind of like how Stephanie, you were saying, and then I'll just walk away and be like, I can't do this right this second. Why don't you try? And then it's so nice because I'll get to hear, somebody that wasn't in the thick of the moment engage. And it's like, oh my gosh, that was so great. Like, I wish I was like calm at that moment, but it gives that time to kind of calm down. But I think really managing my response and my emotion is the most important, the most important thing.
Even telling yourself sometimes, like, what works for me is like, it's not going to be the end of the world if we're late. It's not going to be the end, unless there's, right now we have the fires going on in Los Angeles. And so we were talking about, if it was an emergency and you have to vacate the house, and, the fire is right around the corner, then, that's a different story. But,
Right.
When it's like, okay, we're not always, we're not late every day, or, so I try to convince myself it's not the end of the world. Take a deep breath. And it's nice when you can tap out if you had another person, wife or husband, there to help you, or your significant other. Stephanie, you don't have that. So, what do you do?
I mean, I do struggle with maintaining my cool. It's very difficult. But I've been trying to practice just not responding and like just tapping out and just walking away. He's 13. He knows what he needs to do, right? Like, he knows the consequences if you're late to school, if you get enough tardies, if you're not going to practice, like so it's not like I have to, me telling him to do things over and over,
Right.
and expecting a different response out of him is just, that's insanity, right? Like, I'm saying things over and over. And so I walk away, and he's probably learned, like, oh man, mom has walked away. I should probably do this right now. Like, she's not happy. And it's not like I come
He's at
back, and
this
I might come
level.
back and say stuff, but it's, he's learning that that's what needs to happen. So for me, it's just more of walking away, taking a breath,
them.
and then he knows what, luckily he's old enough to know I don't need to like hold his hand every step of the way. So that is very helpful in certain
Do you-
circumstances.
Do you, Stephanie or Dr. Meyer, do you guys have to, when you do just give them that space, do you usually loop back around if it's something that's, I guess, a pattern of behavior that you're constantly seeing, or you're
Yeah.
kind of in this like cycle? Do you loop back around maybe when it's a time where it's not so heated in the moment to like discuss it, or?
Yeah, so I even did this last night. He's failing a couple classes, and we were able to problem solve, like, hey, what's the problem? What's going on? And so this morning on the way to school, I said, okay, like, we had this conversation last night. It was late. He had football practice. We were getting home. It was like 10:30, but I needed to like figure out what was happening. And so I'm like, so let's talk about like, how are you going to problem solve? What are you going to do? What's going to happen? Do you have any so we were both like in a better mind frame, a state of mind. But I do try to loop back, especially when it comes to like those important things, right? So we're both heated, we're tired, we're upset. We're going to talk about it. I'm not one to be like, okay, we'll talk about it in the morning, you talk about it now. But then once we eat breakfast, we're good to go, we're having a good morning, and then just it's a much calmer conversation. And then I'll talk to him about it again when I come home tonight, just to see like, hey, how did your plan work? Did you talk to your teachers? What are we going to do moving forward? So I do think it's important to loop, especially if it's a big issue or if it's a persistent issue.
We had a while back, and so do we loop back and kind of have a conversation with the kids? So a while back, my wife was having some challenges with the boys. The 18-year-old who is finishing up high school, and the 16-year-old. And in terms of getting to sleep on time so that they're able to wake up in the morning. And so I was telling my wife, let them stay up, because tomorrow I'm going to wake them up at 6 a.m. and I'm going to make sure they get up. We're not going to let them use their alarm so they can press snooze. And we're just going to keep doing that until they start going to bed early. And within like 3 or 4 days, like they started going to bed before 10 o'clock. They were staying up really late, and then she would get up and she would tell them to go to sleep, and they wouldn't go to sleep. I'm like, just stop doing it. It's easier if we just, we're not angry, we're not upset. We just wake up, we open their drapes. There's no alarm. We're their alarm. They have to get up. They have to go get their breakfast, make their breakfast. They have to get everything ready, and we'll just keep doing that until they go to sleep early. So there's no fighting, there's no arguing. Like, stay up as late as you want, but you're gonna have to wake up at 6 in the morning to get ready for school. And so that worked. Like, it took like 2 or 3 days. And I remember thinking like, oh, this is amazing. And it's easier for us because we're not fighting with them. We're not getting angry. We're just like, hey, it's just time to get up. It's just a matter of fact. It's like, you can go to sleep as late as you want, as long as you wake up on time and you go to school and do what you need to do. The other argument, is like, well, they're going to be too tired to school. I'm like, yeah, initially, but when they start going to bed early on their own because they're so tired, it's going to work out the way that we want it to work out. So it's just coming up with a plan too, and having the confidence that, if you have the same reoccurring issue, and we're using the example of running late, like, what can we do? What kind of antecedent manipulations can we make so that we meet with success, right? So rather than getting frustrated, it's almost like sitting back and coming up with a plan so that, arguing and yelling is not really the way that you respond and react to your children. Because, at the end, if you're yelling at your children and you're fighting with your children, it's like, that's what they remember. You're parrying yourself as something really aversive, and they're not going to want to be around you.
When I kind of think of it as like short-term to success, like yelling at them, maybe they're going to do it right then too, and you think it might be the easier route initially. But when you stop and think about it, it's going to be emotionally easier. It's going to like benefit them more if you sit back and take the time to just like, okay, let me stop and think, either react in a different way or come up with a plan.
Sure. And when you come up with a plan, the idea is that it might not work in the first couple of days, but at the end, if you stick with it, like kind of what we just talked about, letting them stay up as late as they want, but making sure they wake up early in the morning, then, within a few days, hopefully you'll meet with success. If it doesn't work within 3 to 5 days, then you might want to go back to the drawing board. But, at the end of the day, it's like we manipulate the antecedents and we manipulate the consequences. What does that mean? We manipulate, or we do, and we control what we do before they engage in certain behaviors, whether it's waking up late or being tardy, and then how we respond to it as well. If what we're doing before and after the behavior, being late, doesn't make a difference, then we have to change that. We have to come up with a different plan. And I tell the kids too, like, because, a lot of times we talk about consequences have to be immediate, because, if you are dealing with individuals that have complex language skills, you can describe to them the rules. And that's the beauty of it, but you have to stick by those rules. Okay, if you're late this week, what works well too is you're going to lose, privileges of the car. You're not going to get to use the car. And if you're on time, then you get to use the car. That rule might change behavior, or it might not initially, but then when you follow through with it, ideally it'll change behavior. And if it doesn't, then you got to come up with a different plan.
We should talk about this idea of like why it's worth the effort of like keeping it inside and not yelling it out. And if you haven't watched our videos about reinforcement and functions of behavior, like go back and watch those, because it'll be really, really helpful. But like if you're thinking about the function of, talking back, and if you are talking back with them, are we increasing the behavior? Or you might have another kid where yelling at them and reprimanding them might decrease the behavior, and you're expecting them to do it more and go faster and get there on time, but your reprimand might actually be keeping them from increasing their behavior and stopping them. So I think it's important to talk about why it's worth to put that effort in for long-term behavior change.
Well, and I also think like what I've caught myself doing is like things that I've maybe been upset about, not, running late, or how many times I have to wake you up, or, is making sure that I'm reinforcing the effort that they're putting in and praising them. Like, I really like that you got up right when I asked you to get up, or you immediately put the dish away in the sink after eating breakfast, and trying to remember to do those things, as those are behaviors that I want to see more of. Effort. So like, hey, I got an A on my test, or hey, I brought my grade up, or whatever. Like, I'm not nagging you. I'm not asking you. You're coming to me. You're doing these things on your own. I want to make sure that I'm making that like a point to like reinforce it or praise that effort. It might not be the exact thing that I want, but it's getting towards the goal. And I think that takes a lot of just like remembering to do that in the hustle bustle of daily life.
So
Which
true. Oh my gosh.
is like the question of how do you guys remember? How do you remember in those moments when it's so hard?
It's not every time, and I feel good when I'm like, oh yeah, I remember I did that. And and I want to get on that roll to do it. It's very difficult because great, they're doing what you want them to do. They're doing what they should be doing. Why do I have to praise them and tell them they're doing a good job? And I think that it's a lot of coming back to why it's important. Like what do we want to see more of? And just knowing that that's how we're going to see more of what we want to see.
And I also think it's like fostering that relationship of like the positive in between you and your child too.
Yeah.
If like you're always telling them what to do all the time or what they're doing wrong, it is really important just also for that fostering that relationship. I mean, most kids are seeking out their parents' approval even through adulthood. So,
right.
I think that's a really good point that you make, Stephanie.
So just to kind of recap, some simple tips, like things to remember, like before it slips out of your mouth, pause before you speak, make yourself take a deep breath, because it's going to force you to think for a minute and decide, do I say something or do I do what Stephanie does and I just put it on hold? Ask yourself, what can I teach right now? Like, and if you have it within you to teach, because if you're absolutely exhausted, then it's not a teachable moment. And lastly, practice positive language. Like, you can give feedback and correction, and it doesn't have to be in a negative way. You can find a way to say it positively so you have a really good relationship and rapport with your children.
Thank you. I want to thank you guys for being so open and honest too, and sharing some of the personal experiences that you have with your children. So hopefully those of you that are listening will get something out of this, and it'll give you an opportunity to kind of come up with a plan with your significant other with any of the challenges that you're experiencing with your children. So thank you for joining us today at Parent Like a Professional, PLP. We hope to see you guys soon in the near future. Take care.
Bye.